It all kicks off in 2005, deep in the heart of South Korea, where the news is buzzing with a string of serial killings that are getting worse by the day. Nobody has a clue who's behind them. The latest hit happened just last night, and this guy's got a nasty habit. He crashes into his victims' cars on dark roads, then finishes them off with brutal savagery. Meanwhile, Detective Tae, a sharp cookie, is on his way to last night's crime scene. On the way, he spots a bunch of gangsters chilling outside a gambling den. Traffic's at a standstill, so he decides to have a little fun. He tries to walk in, but the thugs try to stop him. One of them makes a fatal mistake, trying to bribe him. Tae absolutely loathes that kind of stuff, so he proceeds to hand them their asses on a platter and storms into the gambling joint. He arrests one of the workers for illegal trading. Word quickly gets to the boss, Dong, a real gorilla of a man and one of South Korea's biggest gang leaders. He drops everything and rushes over, fuming that someone dared to snatch one of his guys without permission. He calls the police chief, practically spitting fire. I pay you and your crew enough, and anything you need, you get. So why's one of your detectives busting my guys? The chief is shocked, as he'd sent Tae to the crime scene, not Dong's place. He assures Dong he'll sort it out ASAP and immediately calls Tae, ordering him to drop everything and head straight to the crime scene. Tae clearly isn't a fan of his boss, and true to form, he ignores the order. Instead, he drags the arrested guy along, thinking he can get to the crime scene faster. When he finally gets there, Detective Cha tells him the victim bled out, obviously from a serious beating. She says she's still confirming everything after analyzing the evidence. But Tae, being the sharp detective he is, spots a distinct white scratch on the victim's car. He snaps a photo and tells Cha, I hope this was a crime of passion, because if not, our serial killer's back. At the same time, Boss Dong is chilling with another gang leader named Sang. Dong clearly can't stand Sang, who seems completely uninterested in their business dealing. Sang, on the other hand, is a master of staying calm, just munching away, totally ignoring Dong. This infuriates Dong. When Dong's aide sees his boss upset, he loses it on Sang, telling him, Boss Dong is only putting up with you because you're his friend. Anyone else would have been buried 6 feet under. Sang's aide fires back, and Sang, without a word, throws a bowl of soup right in Dong's aide's face. Dong then beats both of them for talking like that in his presence. He tells Sang, giving you one last chance to get your act together. If you don't, I will. Then he walks out. Meanwhile, the detectives are huddled together, debating the latest case. One suggests it might be a robbery, since the victim's wallet went missing. Another counters that the victim wasn't wealthy, so robbery seems unlikely. A third offers a different theory, leaving everyone scratching their heads. The chief, wanting to wrap things up, declares it a robbery and closes the file, telling the detective to look for anyone with a prior robbery record. Sure, the culprit will be among them, but Tae isn't having it. He insists this case, and the two before it, are serial killing. The chief is puzzled. 2 other cases? What are you talking about? Tae then lays out files of old cases with the same evidence and the same brutal method. He shows them the identical knife marks on both old and new victims, proving it's the same killer using the same weapon. But the chief still isn't convinced and reams Tae for investigating a case that wasn't his. Tae, frustrated, argues, it doesn't matter whose case it is, what matters is catching the criminal. But the chief is stubborn, ending the meeting and telling everyone to stick to their own cases. A bit later, Boss Dong is leaving his establishment, clearly bothered by Sang's antics. He tells his aide to take the guys and leave. He has an errand to run. He drives off alone. As he's on the phone with another boss, a white car suddenly slams into his. Dong gets out to see who hit him, and it's the serial killer, out hunting for a new victim. But luck's not on his side this time. He's picked a fight with the human tank. As soon as the killer sees Dong, built like a brick wall, he profusely apologizes, claiming the road was too dark and rainy to see. Dong, surprisingly, has a good heart and doesn't realize he's standing in front of the devil himself, who's been hunting innocents. It's fine, he says. Just take your car and go. But as Dong turns his back, the killer strikes, stabbing him repeatedly, trying to finish him off. He severely underestimates Dong, who, despite the pain, fights back, breaking the killer's bone, and even managing to grab the knife and stab him in the chest. But Dong is weakening fast from his own stomach wound and can't hold on. The killer manages to escape in his car. Minutes later, we see Boss Dong in the operating room, barely clinging to life. When his men find out what happened, they wrongly assume it was Sang. They storm Sang's place, trashing everything. At the very same moment, the serial killer is tending to his chest wound. Suddenly, he hears someone nearby, grabs his knife, and brutally finishes them off too. The next day, Boss Dong wakes up from surgery. He tells his aide it wasn't Sang, and that the guy he saw wasn't any gangster he'd ever encountered. He describes the white sedan and gives him the license plate number, ordering him to find the car immediately. Soon after, Detective Tae arrives to see Dong, making fun of him for being a big-shot gangster and getting into such a mess. Honestly, if I were you, I'd be so embarrassed in front of my crew, Tae quips. But don't worry, tell me what happened, and I'll get you justice. Dong, of course, can't stand Tae. Lighten up. Worry about yourself. I'll get my own justice. Tae tries to get him to talk, but Dong refuses. Losing hope, Tae heads to the garage where his car is parked. He starts inspecting everything, noticing numerous dents and scratches. He sees the same white scratch that was on the last victim's car. He photographs it, knowing this is the same person behind all the previous crime. He then goes to the police chief, telling him he can crack this case if he's allowed to investigate it legally. The chief refuses. Tae pleads, explaining that this case and the previous ones are all linked to the same person. He tells him that Boss Dong is the only survivor, and if they cooperate, he could help them catch the killer faster and easier since he's the only one who's seen him. But the chief still doesn't believe him and kicks him out of the office, accusing him of being a failed detective who's just spouting nonsense to get a promotion. A little later, Boss Sang visits Boss Dong in the hospital. After giving him flowers and feigning sympathy, he breaks Dong's spirit again, mocking him. If that happened to me, I'd bury myself and escape the shame. Everyone seems to be enjoying Dong's misery, as he was infamous for his ruthlessness, and no one dared to even look at him before. That night, the serial killer is back to his devilish work. He encounters a truck driver and brutally kills him, then drives off in his truck. In his haste, his knife falls onto the road. At the same time, Boss Dong has hired a talented artist. He begins describing the killer's features from memory, and the artist sketches every detail Dong provides. The drawing turns out to be remarkably similar to the killer. The next day, Tae visits Boss Dong, asking him to cooperate to catch the killer. Dong refuses, insisting he can handle it himself, and doesn't need anyone's help. Tae then threatens to jail him for his past crimes if he doesn't cooperate. Dong, phased, still refuses, determined to catch the killer himself. Tae tries a different angle, telling him this is a very dangerous serial killer. If they don't work together and catch him quickly, he'll keep going, killing more and more people. This makes Dong realize he really does need to cooperate with Tae to stop the killer. The next day, Dong and his men are looking to buy a massive building to expand their gambling operation, but his aide tells him the project might fail due to a lack of investors. He explains that investors are wary of partnering with them after what happened to Dong recently. Their reputation has taken a hit, and no one trusts them anymore. This further enrages Dong at the killer who ruined his reputation. He asks his aide if he found anything about him. The aide replies that he found the killer's car at a farm near the highway called Shin Farm. A murder also happened at that same farm a few days ago, meaning the killer was responsible. He also found the killer's knife on the highway near the farm. Dong takes the knife. The next day, he meets Detective Tae, telling him he found the killer's car and knife. They agree to cooperate and help each other, but with the condition, whoever catches the killer first gets to deal with him their own way. If Tae catches him, he'll go to jail and face the law. But if Boss Dong catches him, well, let's just say God have mercy on his soul. Tae agrees, knowing he'll benefit from Dong's power and his men. Dong agrees, knowing Tae's intelligence and investigative skill. Dong gives Tae the killer's picture and all the evidence he found, which will help them catch the killer. But he's still not entirely trusting Tae, who is After all, a cop. It turns out he recorded their entire conversation, just in case Tae tries anything shady. Tae is furious that Dong tricked him, but he has no choice but to play by the rules to keep his job. Tae then gathers his trusted friends, explains everything, and outlines the plan. They all agree to cooperate because they trust him. He shows them the killer's pictures and tells them everything about him. They go to the location where Boss Dong hid the killer's car, start dismantling it, and investigate every single part, hoping to find anything that leads them to the killer. At the same time, Boss Dong's men are gearing up, collecting all the money they'll need to hunt down the killer. Even though both teams need each other, they don't fully trust each other. Both are surprised that the police are working with the biggest gang on the same mission. Boss Dong decides to use the knife with the killer's fingerprint. He sends one of his men to kill Boss Sang with it, clearing the field for himself. The next day, Tae takes all the evidence he found in the car to Detective Cha for analysis and fingerprint identification. At the same time, the police learn about the assassination of Boss Sang. Detective Cha quickly rushes to the crime scene and finds the knife in Sang's room. When she analyzes the fingerprints, she finds they belong to the same person Tae gave her fingerprints for yesterday. She calls him and tells him that the same person who killed the others also killed Boss Sang. Tae, knowing the knife was with Boss Dong, confronts him, furious that this could land them in deep trouble. Dong dismisses it, saying, "Don't be so soft-hearted. I just wanted to do something with it before it was gone." Tae is at his wit's end. News spreads like wildfire about the latest murder, as Sang was a well-known gang leader. The real killer is sitting in a restaurant, watching the news. He's surprised by the report, because while he committed the previous crime, he didn't kill this time. That night, Boss Sang's men are mourning. Boss Dong goes to offer condolences for the man he just killed, even saying he was one of his dearest friends. The surprise is that the killer is also at the funeral, but no one notices him because they still don't know his true face. Later, the killer approaches Boss Sang's aide and tells him he's the serial killer and that someone else used his knife to kill Boss Sang. Everyone suspects Boss Dong, because no one else would dare do such a thing. When Dong hears this, he waits until the funeral is over, then takes his men to Boss Dong's place, trying to finish him off. Luckily, Detective Tae is with him. A massive fight breaks out, and they are heavily outnumbered. But despite the odds, Tae and Dong are not easy targets. Together, they manage to fend off Sang's men. However, during the fight, Tae accidentally kills one of the attackers while defending himself. He's shocked, as this is his first time doing something like this. And if anyone finds out, he could be fired and even jailed. Dong tells him to leave quickly, assuring him he'll take care of everyone there and make them disappear. At the same time, the devil killer takes another victim's car and drives off. When the victim's phone rings in the car, he answers. When he realizes it's the victim's wife, he hangs up immediately. The next day, he calls her back, demanding money in exchange for seeing her husband again. Luckily, Tae and his friends have already learned about her husband's case and gone to her house. They agree with her to meet him with the money, so they can pinpoint his location and arrest him. She does as they say, but when she gets to the meeting spot, she finds the restaurant owner, who takes the bag from her. Tae notices the killer standing far from the restaurant, anticipating police presence. When Tae spots him, he alerts his team, and they all try to catch him. But the killer is incredibly fast and skilled at escaping, and he manages to slip away from all of them. They return to the restaurant and try to get any information about him from the owner. She says she doesn't know him, that he was just a regular customer who asked her to receive a bag for him. During their conversation, they learn he drank a specific beverage. They take the bottle he drank from to analyze it and identify the DNA. Detective Cha successfully identifies the real killer and brings his file to Detective Tae. When they inquire about him, they find out where he lives. They go to his landlady and ask about him. She tells them he's a very clean person, always helps people, and never delays rent. Tae enters his apartment and starts searching. It smells awful and is full of strange things he collects from his victims. Tae notices a recent picture of him. He takes it and compares it to the picture Boss Dong gave him, finding they are indeed very similar. Now, Tae is 100% sure of his real appearance. He quickly calls Boss Dong to tell him the new information, as agreed, and to prepare for what's next. Dong gathers all his men and meets with Detective Tae and his team. The team explains everything to Dong's men so they understand who they're dealing with. They tell them that the person they are dealing with is a very dangerous devil, and despite his danger, he is always cautious and prepared. Dong's large crew, however, doesn't care about any of this. All they care about is catching the guy their boss wants. They start distributing pictures of the killer's real face, ordering them not to close their eyes for a second until they catch him. Dong's men spread out across the entire city, searching for the killer. Days pass, and they can't find him. One day, Boss Dong is on an errand with Detective Tae. While waiting, he sees a student leaving her school, drenched in rain, without an umbrella. He gives her his umbrella, showing how kind-hearted Boss Dong is despite being a gang leader. When Detective Tae arrives and learns he did a good deed, he's very surprised. He tells the girl not to take anything from strangers again, because the man who gave her the umbrella is a gang leader. The girl playfully retorts, "You look more like a gang leader than him." Dong laughs at Detective Tae. That night, they are all together enjoying their cooperation. But suddenly, news breaks of a new, devilish crime. The news is shocking to everyone. The victim is the same student Boss Dong gave his umbrella to that morning. This infuriates him even more, igniting a fire of revenge and rage within him. He sends more and more of his men, ordering them to search everywhere until they find this bastard. His men spread out across the city again, starting their search in areas close to the crime scene, as the killer wouldn't have had time to go far. They start showing pictures of the bastard to people, asking if anyone saw him. They manage to find his location through people who saw him. They all go to set up an ambush at his residence, waiting to catch him. When he arrives, he notices their presence, gets into his car, and speeds away. But they've finally found him again, and they all chase after him. Boss Dong manages to ram his car, bringing him to a stop. But as Dong gets out to grab him, he realizes the killer has already gotten out of his car and is trying to escape. They continue to chase him, but he leads them down a confusing path, forcing them to split up to catch him. The bastard isolates Boss Dong's aide and finishes him off. Boss Dong rushes towards his aide's scream, but sadly, he's too late. His aide takes his last breath, his life ending. Dong is even more enraged and continues his pursuit of this devil. He finds him hiding behind a door like a chicken. A gorilla like Dong isn't going to knock before entering. He smashes through the door, breaking it over the killer's head. He keeps hitting him through the door until he breaks him. He then calls Detective Tae and says, "Mission accomplished. The killer is mine now." He hangs up. He takes the killer to his hideout and starts beating and torturing him for everything he did to him and others. Despite his condition, the killer still taunts Boss Dong, who decides to end his evil for good and finish him off. At the last second, Detective Tae drives his car right into the entire place, hitting Boss Dong. He then leaves Dong lying there, defeated, takes the killer, and drives off. He does this because his goal from the beginning was to catch the killer and hand him over to the authorities, dealing with him legally. He proudly walks into the police station and hands over the killer, saying, "I'm the one who caught the killer." He tells the chief, "You kept talking about first squad and second squad, and in the end, no one caught him but me." Tae is incredibly happy and proud of himself for successfully apprehending this devil. Days later, the day of the killer's trial arrives, but he's hired a very clever lawyer who tries to get him off the hook for all his crime. He tells the judge that the knife found is not sufficient proof that his client is the real killer. And indeed, the knife isn't enough evidence, and there's a chance he might walk free as if he did nothing. But suddenly, Boss Dong walks in. He's the witness and the only victim who survived the devil's attack. He begins to testify against the killer, showing the judge the wounds on his body from the day of the attack. He tells them that when he was attacked, he fought back and managed to stab the killer in his left shoulder. When they remove the killer's clothes, they find Boss Dong's words are true. Thus, Dong's testimony is confirmed as truthful, and it's confirmed that he is indeed the killer. We learn that Detective Tae went to Boss Dong and apologized for his sneaky move to get him to testify in court against the killer. Boss Dong agreed to the deal after giving Detective Tae a good beating, but on one condition: he wanted to be imprisoned in the same jail as the killer so he could get his revenge. And so, after the testimony, the killer is sentenced to life in prison. Boss Dong is also sentenced to a short prison term due to his status as a gang leader and his many past crimes. With the case fully solved, Detective Tae and his team receive promotion. Days later, Boss Dong is transferred to the same prison as the killer to get his revenge, as he agreed with Detective Tae. And well, you don't need me to tell you what Boss Dong did to him. And that's where the movie ends. If you made it this far, don't forget to drop an emoji so I know who liked the summary. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for all our new videos. Peace out.